Hello, brothers and sisters. This is Sister Sarah. Father has been, for the past few weeks, really pushing me to read the book of Ruth, because the book of Ruth somehow is connected with the harvest, which is the reaping of souls and gathering of either God's people or the wicked. And somehow they are interconnected. Very interesting. In the book of Ruth, Naomi and Ruth, they come to Bethlehem, which is where Jesus was born. So the owner of the field, which is Boaz, the person who Ruth got married and had the son that would be one of the forefathers of King David. He is a type of Jesus. He's the owner of the field, the owner of the land. And very interestingly, Jesus was born in Bethlehem. And this is why he says that he came only to the lost sheep of Israel. Because in the grand scheme of salvation and the plans, the only ones that were lost in their ways were the people of Israel, because the Gentiles in the grand scheme of salvation were already somehow in the plan of redemption. However, Israel needed the Gentiles to be redeemed in the last hour, and the Gentiles needed Israel for the birth of the Messiah. So the last is not better than the first, and the first is not better than the last. They both needed each other in the grand plan of Father Yahweh's salvation. Anyway, interestingly enough, there is a lot of analogies between Ruth and working after the reapers, gleaning the fields. We all know that the field in the parables of Jesus is talking about the world, and the seeds and the plants planted into the field represent groups of people. I just want to go through two different groups of people. I might have to make two videos for that, but the first group of people is the group called barley. And the group of people called barley are the people that are harvested prior to wheat, which in another parable of Jesus talks about the great last harvest, where the tares will be divided from the wheat, God's people. Wheat, tares, Satan's people. Anyway, so continuing on Ruth's book, it talks that the handmaiden, Ruth, was a faithful person to her mother-in-law, Naomi. And because of her humility, her faithfulness, and because she left everything she had and followed the Holy One of Israel, because she followed Naomi, who used to worship the Holy One of Israel, Boaz favored her. And it's very interesting that he says, because you have forsaken all and looked for refuge in the God of Israel, you will be blessed and will receive a full reward. And then Ruth, because she was favored from Boaz because of her faithfulness, he said to the reapers, which we know in the Bible refers to angels, okay? The reapers of the harvest are the angels of the Lord. And the Boaz said to the reapers, let her, Ruth, glean among the sheaves, and let grain fall on purpose that she may glean. And she was given in the first day an ephah of barley. So she, the handmaiden Ruth, stayed at Boaz's field until the end of barley harvest and the wheat harvest. Okay, the handmaiden of the Lord stayed in the field of the master, gleaning and gathering after the reapers, the angels, harvested the crops. Then we have the picture of Ruth going into the threshing floor where Boaz was sleeping. And I went to look a little bit deeper on how it looks, the reaping or the harvest, or what do you do with the grain after it's harvest off the soil. And winnowing means to, interestingly enough, to remove people or things from a group until the best ones are left. Winnowing means remove people or things from a group until the best ones are left. Okay? So I went further, and I wanted to know what happens at the threshing floor when the grains are being, cleaned up and separated. And it's very interesting for everyone that has the picture of what we call the rapture, or the harvest of souls, or the first fruits. For everyone that has the picture of Hollywood where your entire body just floats up in the sky and you'll be with the Lord forever, understand that for you to be separated and found worthy, if you make the analogy between what happens in the threshing floor to the refining of the God's people, I tell you, you are mistaken for thinking that the rapture will be the Hollywood thing of people floating about. Okay? So I tell you, when the grain in the threshing floor is separated from straw and husks, it is done by beating it manually. Then oxen and cattle would tread over the grain, loosening the edible part of the cereal. Then the winnowing fork was used to throw the mixture into the air so the wind could blow away the chaff, leaving the good grain on the floor. So I'm going to leave all the scriptures below. So we know that Israel is considered the first fruits of the Lord, and Jesus' sacrifice was done according to the law of the Jewish, and he was considered the first fruits of the Lord. I see if I can find here a little information on what happens in the feast of the first fruits, which is very interesting. Now we know that the first fruits of the Lord, or the barley, the first crop harvested, is Israel. Okay, so this is what would happen. There were 3 baskets of barley that were taken to the temple to be threshed with rods, as opposed to ox-powered sledges, to preserve the barley heads. The barley was then parched in a flame and winded in the wind to remove the chaff. The barley was then milled and sifted until it was very fine. According to the Talmud, the inspectors should be able to stick their hands into the barley flour without any flour sticking to the hands when they were removed. Okay? And this was the first fruits offering. The priest would wave this before the Lord, burning some and giving the rest to the Levites. And I want to continue reading on. Okay, the reaping of barley would continue until 2/3 of a bushel was reaped. Okay, when something is being reaped, it's not pleasant, it's not beautiful, it's not romantic. Okay. When something's being reaped or harvested, it's cut, and it's not done beautifully. So when we read 1 Thessalonians 4:17, and we are talking about the hapazo catching away, okay, it's very important that people understand that this catching away is described as a strong event. An event that means that something is cut off, okay? It's ripped off the earth. It's not this Hollywood beautiful thing that happens, okay? So people are trained throughout their lives. They are treaded by emotional whatevers that they have to go through, and they have to overcome all of that. But when we are talking about the harvest, there is also the physical aspect, not just the emotional, there is the physical. So God's people have to be ready and prepared to whatever is coming that way. All right, to whatever is coming our way. We can't be this, oh, I've suffered so much, I've had enough, and all of that. Yes, perhaps we've had enough, perhaps, yes, we've suffered that much, perhaps we've been smashed, but so has Jesus been through all those things. Okay? So continue in about the barley harvest. Father actually told me to ask the question, does the barley harvest happen before the wheat harvest? And the answer is yes, as we know. Jesus Christ was the first fruit of the harvest. Okay? And in every generation, we have the first fruits of the harvest. When you go to the story of Exodus, where Father was delivering the Hebrews from the king, I think it's described in Psalm 78:51. It's clear that in that story specifically, the first fruits were harvested out of Egypt, and Egypt is belongs to the tent of Ham. Remember Ham, who was cursed by Noah in Genesis. Okay, so that happening where the Passover and the death came on all the firstborn was a type of first fruits harvest unto the Lord. So we understand that all those who were killed as a sign to the Hebrews, or down the track Israelites, was a sign to them, but also was a sacrifice of first fruits unto the Lord. Don't we all belong to the Lord? Yes. So all those who died on that night are with the Lord. Okay, it's important that everyone understands that. So we also see that Ham, who is one of the fathers, or perhaps a major type of people amongst the Egyptians, is also the father of Canaan. Then we understand that Ham was cursed by Noah, and we understand what Jesus says to that woman that was asking for his help. She was asking for his help, and he says that, you don't get the food of the children, in this case Israel, and give it on to the dogs. So the dogs were the cursed people in that case. She was a Canaanite, and she surprises him with her faith. As we know, the Gentiles already were included in the plan of salvation. The lost ones were the Israelites, okay? And he is surprised with her faith, and he says, your wish is granted, not because of who you are, but because of your faith. Okay, so let's not go too further. So coming back to the barley harvest, now we understand the book of Zechariah. When you understand the feast of first fruits, and we understand that Israel is the barley and Jesus was the first fruits, we also understand the harvest that will happen in Israel, okay, where people will be refined. Now that we know that 2/3 of a bushel of barley was reaped, okay, in the first fruits feast. Then we come here to Zechariah 13:8, and it goes like that. God speaking to Zechariah, and God declares, 2/3 will be struck down and perish, yet 1/3 will be left. This third I will put into the fire. I will refine them like silver and test them like gold. They will call on my name, and I will answer them. I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is our God. Continuing. A day of the Lord is coming. A day of the Lord is coming. Jerusalem, when your possessions will be plundered and divided up within your very walls. And I will get all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. Okay? The city will be captured, the house ransacked, woman raped, half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. Then the Lord will go and fight against those nations. All right? So we know that at the very end, Jerusalem and Israel as a whole will be ripped and will be refined, and they will call unto the Lord. We know that when Jerusalem is surrounded, we're very close to that happening. We're very close to the second coming. All right, so that's the barley harvest. I hope everyone understands that this harvest and the separation of good and bad happens throughout the generations, as in Genesis says, as long as the earth stands, the earth will be harvested. That is foreseeing not only the harvest of crops, but the harvest of souls and of people, the separation between good and bad. So it's important that everyone understand. If you're saying, oh, the barley harvest will go first, yes, perhaps it will go first if you consider that. But understand, please, if you are considered first fruits because you are faithful unto the Lord and you have been tried and you have overcome, just like Jesus has overcome everything, okay? Understand this is not an easy process and may include physical death, okay? May include physical death. So we have to understand that. And the handmaidens of the Lord, as described in the book of Ruth, have a role in the harvest, okay? The understanding that I get is that the handmaidens is the bride of Christ. The one that will be shining forth and will be preaching the gospel to many. There will be obviously roles for men. There will be valiant men of the Lord. They will be doing amazing things. But also the handmaidens, the servants of the Lord, the bride of Christ, which may even include men and women. We don't really know about that mystery, you know, if the bride of Christ is also the church or a group of people. We're going to be revealed all of those things rather soon. So I hope that everyone understands the harvest of first fruits is Israel, okay? And it's harvested first, like it was when Jesus came and suffered for everyone's transgressions and redeemed Israel, and salvation came from Israel and all of that, okay? First fruits, barley. Now, the next video I would like to do is about the wheat harvest, which is the harvest that will happen in the end of the world, when the world will be transformed and good and bad will be separated for good, and then we have everything, and then eventually new earth. Again, not an easy process, so please understand. The haphazard rapture is a fact, but this Hollywood dreamy thing of simply being changed and vanishing to thin air and nothing happens and you see nothing is not realistic. Matthew 24 goes against it. And also the description on how things are harvested or separated as well, it's a painful process. It's not an easy process. Okay, Jesus said himself, in this world you'll find tribulations, okay? Many tribulations. I hope that we understand our role as handmaidens and that we continue, just like Ruth, being prepared to do what we are meant to do and to perhaps forsake what we must for the Lord, that we are prepared to do that, and that the harvest is not a Hollywood catching away thing. It's a painful, physical, and perhaps those civil wars, famines, and pestilence would take away quite a few people. And perhaps, yes, you know, they may have a physical death via other means and they may not see the mark of the beast. But some people will end up seeing the mark of the beast and will have to deny, you know. So regardless of the group that we encounter ourselves, whenever the ripping of souls happens, wherever the disasters come, whenever the revelation of the bride comes, you know, and the power and the glory, and we have our time for testimony, we need to be ready. We need to be ready, you know. Our last day can be tomorrow, and we don't know. We just need to be ready to meet the Lord whenever that happens, in whatever way it happens. I hope you all have a blessed week in Jesus' name.